We have so many stories in our lives, but our stories are not always heard. On the Hear My True Story podcast, we tell our own true stories.
Before the white car backed, our head teacher had scattered. Looking at him, I could only see his tie that was flying backwards, waving at us, and he disappeared in thin air.
I want to share my life story. I want to share my voice with the people because I know that just a small joke I can tell through this podcast, it will make someone smile.
When you ask me what I fear most in life, I would definitely respond to you and say it's fear itself.
We are fighting for togetherness. We are fighting for equal rights. We are fighting to end injustice.
You don't have to be a storyteller or writer because, guess what? Life writes the best stories.
Hear my true story.
I call that idea the lost experience because, I gave you a journey of the many achievements that I made in Uganda as an organizer. I was organizing events and I ended up organizing a world final events, like bringing people from all over the world and organizing them in these people were coming to Africa for the first time. And then I moved to Europe, following, the classic love story. And I realized that I needed to, in order to survive, I needed to I couldn't start with my experience that I had. So I had to go, my very first job, I was a canteen helper where I was sort of there was a company I was working at and I was putting the food on the table. And I was reflecting on all these, actually that time was interesting because at around the same time, my profile internationally was growing because I arrived in Denmark, then I got invited to go to Brazil, but I had just arrived in Denmark, so there was this dilemma: do I go to this to this other hip hop tour, or do I stay and focus on rebuilding my new life? So it was a quick decision. I decided to stay.
This is your favorite time of the week with your number one podcast.
Hear my true story.
Yeah, my dear listeners, welcome back again this week. It is me, your host, Otako. We are continuing with our conversation with our guest, Bana Mutibwa, an artist, a political activist, at the same time, a leader. He runs a lot of things back in Uganda, but also is living currently in Denmark, in Europe.
Copenhagen, Denmark.
Yeah, Copenhagen, Denmark. That's
Copenhagen.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm happy to have you again on this wonderful podcast, Hear My True Story. Maybe you can introduce again yourself so that the listeners get to know who is behind the microphone, who are they listening to.
It's your boy, Bana Mutibwa, the Lugaflow revolutionary MC. Yo, ndikuma vinga kaba kubanga nyimba zange zandibaka na lusala oba amadala mutuletera enkyukakyuka si mukutu ogukutuka mukutu omuyitendowooza z'abavubuka mu bwatu okulengera embeera z'abadaga mu ghetto balakadaga bw'abato zayogerera japirya kyakuba haso anoosa amafuta mu kisenya ali ku mpiso tayagazibuye tisetaani za fuso gavumenti ya Museveni kisu kiso siriyokira ekwatira agivuganya mu mazzi n'aziira oba okulemesa ofuna endowooza ez'okubba ekusindike eruzireyo mu jjeera bwe tolaba siteera nyanzi ani amuba ku lwendo lw'otuzzi revolution kyali olina okulembazi nsaba enkyukakyuka ejjebbananga nkyali mulamu people power suubi gye nnina akambeere mugumu ddoboozi lyange kyakulwanisa y'engabo ly'effumu nyimba zange zifukirira revolution nga mudumu nsaba enkyukakyuka ejjebbananga nkyali mulamu people power suubi gye nnina akambeere mugumu ddoboozi lyange kyakulwanisa y'engabo ly'effumu nyimba zange zifukirira revolution nga mudumu
This week's special guest on your favorite podcast.
Hear my true story.
This is your boy Bana Mutibwa, the Lugaflow revolutionary human rights activist. I use rap in Uganda to fight for change in Uganda, mostly as you had my story. But also I work at Alliance of Democracies Foundation as a program manager where I do support democracy tech entrepreneurs from Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova, Armenia, and Venezuela. And I'm a dad, and a family man, but also an activist at heart. I think that's it.
Wow, thank you so much for that quick introduction. Wow, that's so nice. A lot of things that you're doing as a person. I wonder how you really handle this, because you living in Europe can be a lot stressful. I don't know about Denmark, but living in Germany, where I'm living right now, can a lot of things can happen. More especially if you're a dad. I'm also a dad. I have a daughter. Yeah, she's just making right now 1 year, 1st of October. So I'm a new dad.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
My son Louis is making 6 years in a bit. So unfortunately, this is going to be the first birthday where I'm not around because I'm traveling to Ukraine soon to do the work that I do. But yeah, it's time runs so fast as a new parent, and within no time, your daughter she will be asking you tough questions about her story and your story.
Yeah. So you send my greetings to your son. That I've sent greetings from me, Otako. Yeah, I'm really happy. I hope to hear a lot of stories about being dad, maybe sometime, maybe in our conversation, our private conversations, and advice how to handle that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, there's something that you mentioned in the previous episode that I wanted maybe to a little bit talk about it. You know, you talked about something, losing your skills when you move to a country. For example, when you change, the world you are living in Uganda was different. And right now you moved to Denmark, you came and you're living in another world. Why did you mention this in the previous episode, that losing your skills when you move to another country, when you come to other countries? What do you exactly mean?
I call that idea the lost experience, because, I gave you a journey of the many achievements that I made in Uganda as an organizer. I was organizing events, and I ended up organizing a world final event, like bringing people from all over the world and organizing them in these people were coming to Africa for the first time. And then I moved to Europe, following, the classic love story. And I realized that I needed to, in order to survive, I needed to I couldn't start with my experience that I had. So I had to go, my very first job, I was a canteen helper, where I was sort of there was a company I was working at, and I was putting the food on the table. And I was reflecting on all these, actually that time was interesting, because at around the same time, my profile internationally was growing, because I arrived in Denmark, then I got invited to go to Brazil, but I had just arrived in Denmark. So there was this dilemma: do I go to this, to this other hip hop tour, or do I stay and focus on rebuilding my new life? So, it was a quick decision. I decided to stay. Went into the language school, because you're trying to catch up to whatever new country that you have moved on. So you already start from a disadvantaged position, and even the experience that you come with no longer counts. That's not a general story. There are people who have moved to Europe and made use of their experience without having to start over, but majority actually come with degrees, and they have to study new degrees because maybe the standards are not the same, and things like that, and that sort of mirrors the society that we live in. You know, we as Africans, as Black people, we always start from we always start from the back. There was this video that I saw where someone was calling out people. If you grew up with two parents, come in front. If you went to school, come in front. If you did this, and then he told at the end of the video told them, now start to race. So that's actually how we start racing as Africans when we move to these new destinations. We have to run and catch up to the system, and then the system expects us to perform the same way as those that already, it's like running a marathon, and then other people start half of the marathon, but you still have to catch them. So I think that's the idea of lost experience. But again, we usually find our ways to thrive within these barriers that are created by the global system of integration, and migration.
I really relate with your lost experience thing. Whether you're making it as a song or something, I don't know. But I can definitely share my personal experience. I know you, Bana Mutibwa, you were a popular, famous artist in Uganda. By the time you left Uganda...
That's an exaggeration.
Not exaggeration. You organized an international event end of the week in Uganda at the Uganda National Culture Center. I was there because I was a comedian. Yes. Yeah, I could see... I
remember you.
You were not just an artist you were coordinating big things, and then you move to Europe, things change like that. It's the same thing like me. I came from Uganda in 2019, and then I decided to really move to Germany and stay there. Before, I was already doing tours around the world since 2012, moving to Hong Kong, going to India, Thailand, Bangladesh, France, UK, doing theater, using theater to do activism. But then in 2019, I decided to move to Germany. And then I hit the road, you're in Germany, you need to learn the language. Then I get to realize, I can't continue doing theater because I don't know the language. I came with my degree. Wow, I did education, a teacher. Wow, it can't work here. I need to find a school, I need to study. Now, I did 1 to 2 years some theater where I was working in a theater. In Germany, they have that, it's called BUFD. It's a volunteer program for 2 years. Then I realized I need to improve my language. I cannot do theater anymore. And the system designed is simple that as a Black person doing theater, you at 40% to survive. You need a lot.
I can imagine.
Yeah, there's a lot in the system that's really creative. Theater, art. It's not about, it's about who do you know and who are you doing it for. And I realized I'm in a society where my community is not so big. So I need to find my own space. And that's the point. I looked at my experience. I had an organization that I left in Uganda. It is still working right now. It's called Omte Creative. They also run a podcast which is called Ugandan Art Speaks Out. They host artists. They organize, they do campaigns against human trafficking. I'm paying people there. I'm a founder of an organization. Then I come to Germany. My experience was not working. It did not matter. What mattered in Germany was the language, learn the German language. And the system in Germany is built that you either want it or not, you need to learn their language and you need to step back as a migrant who has come in. And also in the migration policies, there's also weighing which part of the world are you coming from. If you're coming from the global south, well, good. Which part of the global south? Africa. Well, that's another story. What kind of education do you have? Well, good. Which country? In Uganda, East Africa. Well, that's another story.
You go behind.
You start realizing that your past 25 years are becoming more useless
Exactly.
And I came at a very old age, in my 30s. I have to choose wisely. Just like you said, you can't start a marathon when other people are in the middle, but the system expects you to catch up. So that's why I had to decide to do.
And I'll tell you, actually, it's also something that I briefly mentioned in the last episode, this youth and hip hop. And I want actually Otako to tell you a little bit about how policies that are drawn from far places can affect your life, and how actually I end up being in Denmark, and some of the strategical decisions I took to do the life that I'm doing today, the work that I'm doing today. Currently, I work for the former Prime Minister of Denmark, called Anders Fogh Rasmussen. He's also a former Secretary General of NATO. But when he was in power, he made this Africa Committee to sort of look at some of the issues that were affecting Africa at the moment. And then they came up with some conclusions, and they said, if we need to create closer cooperations to Africa, we need to support the creative sectors. And there were organizations like CKU that were created out of that. And then CKU brought me to Denmark for the first time, but also employed me when I was in Uganda doing youth and hip hop. So me ending up today in Denmark is as a result of long-term policies. So policies matter a lot. The policies that sometimes affect us as we are in our lives. Sometimes, if you look, they are drawn by people that are so far away places from where you live. So these are some of the interests that I've sort of started going back and looking, there is this idea of serendipity, thinking, why did I end up being the person that did this? So how do everything connect with each other? And I found out some interesting results coming out from that. So when I was in Denmark, and then I visited this school where they told me, because in Denmark, education is free. So when I knew about this, I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to study when I go to Denmark, when I move to Denmark.
Enjoying this episode? Leave a review now.
Hear my true story.
I think the point that I was trying to make, that sometimes we end up in places where we end up when we come to Europe, not entirely by choice, but as a result of long-term policies. So, for example, Otako, the reason you're in Germany probably is because you started traveling to Germany, and then you started being exposed to Germany, or maybe through that you met your wife, and that's the same thing that happened to me. Through this chain of command that we end up being exposed closer to the people of the countries that actually support Africa in different ways or the other.
Yeah, and I think such policies, if they are really developed very well and really followed a lot, it's one of the ways to really find a way of dealing with this issue of migration that is right now affecting Europe. Instead of, funding the dictators back home to stop migrants, for example, in Tunisia, Libya, policies that really encourage systems to work together can really benefit each system. Because I can't come here to Germany and then go back to Uganda on my own decision. But when policies are not there to support such smooth exchange of skills, labor, exchange of knowledge, exchange of young people with the global south, global north, then that's my suggestion, then we are not able to deal with the issue of migration. But I don't want us to...
I would call it, sharing of the common resources of the world that we live in.
Yeah.
And also sharing of the wealth that our grandchildren helped create.
Yeah, but then
through policies that work for the continent, and those that actually migrate to Europe and other places around the world.
Yeah, but then you talked about this losing of the skills, lost experience. How can someone avoid that? A person like me, right now, I'm doing my pre-educator vocational training in Germany because that's the only way I could find my way into employment system or into the system in Germany. So, how would someone, for example, who has moved from the global south, let us be specific, from Africa, and they have their experience back home, what would you tell them? How can they really not lose that experience? Some of us, you are lucky because of the creative arts, but there are people who are doing other kinds of work. How can they really not lose their experience that they have built for a long time?
I think I'm gonna answer that question with respect to my story, because I really don't know how it would be done otherwise. I've only lived my life. At least what I had to do, I still lost some experience, but what I had to do is I prepared for my life in Europe. I knew at some point that, I might be moving. So when I visited Denmark in the summer of 2014, that's when I decided that I'm actually going to go to school. But remember, I had dropped out many years ago, as I mentioned in the first episode. So after I inquired, they told me that to come into this high school, you need to do a math exam and an English exam. So having dropped out, when I went back to Uganda, I hired a math tutor to come teach me mathematics at my place because, I was very rusty with mathematics. So this guy would come, I would give him 20K every time he came. And then he taught me mathematics, preparing for this interview that will come in the future of when I get to move to Denmark. But at the same time, I was still organizing my world finals in Uganda. So in that sense, I deliberately, or at least I tried to look for jobs within hip hop, and I tried apply to community houses to see if they could help me. They gave me a job, but still there was this language barrier, as you talked about. So I knew that what I had to do, I had to go back to school, but I also simultaneously had to quickly learn the language. Funny enough, I think the entire Danish that I speak, and I'm pretty good at conversational Danish, I learned it in the first 6 months because then I had a goal. So I think one way to do it is to set some short-term goals, but also some long-term goals. What the language can help you to do is to quickly and fastly integrate within the work environment, but also even for you to better understand what is the kind of life do I want to live in my new home. Because, we usually come thinking we're going to stay for 5 years, but then afterwards, now it's soon clocking to 9 years since I've lived here. So it's better to prepare for the long game, in my advice, but people have different goals, because you've also had people who come a little bit older and all they care about is to make money for, let's say, 10, 20 years and go back home and retire. But we come from I came from a more creative background where I had the things I had achieved in Uganda. I knew if I used the same mindset, I would be able to achieve at the same level as any other Danish citizen. So I was prepared for this kind of life through the life I lived before, and I was determined because from my application that I sent to get into my high school, I told them I want to study politics. I want to understand how the system works. And in Denmark, most of the political courses at university that they're taught in Danish, but I applied to this one, which is taught in English. Actually, I wanted most of the politics part, but this one, the only one in English, came with international business, so which was an additional layer to understand how the economics of the world work. And then that was the journey. There was no shortcut. But really throughout all those years, because when you think since 2014 to 2023 now, when I've actively decided to return to music, I've just been working to actually start my life. I feel like my life has just started, and then it's now that I want to get back to something that I care so much about. But within all these years, what I've been doing is to release a track here and there, but without from Uganda Passport, the mixtape, I've never released like a full product, let's say like an album or a mixtape. It's been just different singles here and there.
Africa is rich and not poor. Africa has immense actual and potential wealth: gold, diamond, copper, manganese, bauxite, iron ore, uranium, asbestos, chrome, cobalt, and hopes of other minerals.
Yeah, sigali Africa leva wanangalia soja ndimo America France na sinaba muna you na sinaba Uganda kubanga nande bada bakala black talaba flag talaba mawanga bloody diamonds da banga bamba lobuwanga nyamba tifirika yinirenga mwanga bere biru bodiranga matiwa jemva kananga suna kanuga revolution kuchusa system ozimfuga nediramba gonga sanongo kabanda magero kids come when bana yechi banda magolo ke reality jumi abasanyu semo kumeke chibanga hayita wa mulongo chakoye byamawanga nagera amanyijava koye byosabe misane sala yomukaga kama nyije byava mutiwa nediramba gonga chaguranyi buzanzani I weigh myself kuminzani nzani I weigh myself kuminzani nzani alusonga mafuga nganyanze chokurana sanze chininalye dobozi sesiga mahoses chesiga kulembera mwesigide myaka menje buyake bwa kulembeza kuzina family ye gatta komikwano je yagenda monse kokurana kununura bukwangalye weyali wa speech ye yagamba obuzibu bwa kulembeza mu Africa kubra montebezo byatiye mu jakoze buzabo zigora sitegera example janda ze ali manyasi zensigo man study sili na musango kutiko yadama tumugunya wakanyama tulugunya semateka gwati gati gato yafugandi gate mukoye bwafu temukoye fugi bwamateka amajafu bula ubungu bwo babukwasa isi balafu kwanidide dembe lyo kwanidide gwanga lyo jukibrenga mandelo bomuzira wapana po kula ubungu bwo babukwasa isi balafu kwanidide dembe lyo kwanidide gwanga lyo jukibrenga mandelo bomuzira wapana po kwanidide dembe lyo kwanidide gwanga lyo jukibrenga mandelo bomuzira wapana po.
But your story inspires me a lot. That's what I can say.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And keep the work, keep doing the job of activism for Ugandans back home, but also in Denmark. And I look forward to meeting people. If you have any suggestions, I can host more people on the podcast who are willing to share their personal stories. It's my honor when you recommend it to me, certain people. And I'm always grateful for that.
I definitely will.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I would like you to say the last word you want to say to our dear listeners as we conclude our conversation.
I mean, just go on all your social media platforms and follow Bana Mutibwa, follow the music, follow the journey, share it to your closest people, but also reach out to me and let me know what you thought about my story, or if you have any synergies that you see and you want to collaborate or write an article or future on a collaboration, please don't hesitate. It's your boy Bana Mutibwa, the Lugaflow, revolutionary human rights activist, Obama leader.
Thank you so much, my dear guest. Our dear listeners, because of time, we cannot really go beyond right now. I would want to say thank you for always following Hear My True Story podcast. And at the same time, for those who are listening for the first time, this is Hear My True Story. You can subscribe, you can listen to this podcast on all podcast streaming platforms. And don't forget to follow Bana Mutibwa on all social media platforms, and also to listen to his music on all music streaming platforms. Next week, we have again part 2 of the same conversation. I hope to have you again next week. Thank you for listening, and thank you for always supporting Hear My True Story podcast. And for that reason, I would like to say bye for now.
We not only have voices for a podcast, but also faces for YouTube. Don't miss your next episode. Hear my true story.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Music by Edwin Matovo, hosted and produced by Otako. Subscribe to our podcast for more stories and visit us on our website, hearmytruestory.com, for more stories. All the links are listed in the show notes of this podcast.